Ontario is home to countless communities that rose quickly, thrived for a moment, and then slowly faded as industries shifted or disappeared. Scattered across the province are mining towns swallowed by the wilderness, abandoned ports once booming with trade, and quiet rural settlements where only a few residents remain. Each one has a story, a rise, a fall, and a legacy left behind in the buildings, foundations, and landscapes that remain. If you enjoy exploring forgotten places and uncovering the history behind them, please give this video a like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow and lets me keep bringing you more stories just like these. Today, we will explore some of the most fascinating and historically significant ghost towns in Ontario, starting with the remarkable story of Silver Islet. Imagine working on a mine that sits on a tiny island in the middle of Lake Superior, one of the fiercest lakes in the world. Far out on the icy waters of Lake Superior lies Silver Islet, a tiny island that, for a brief moment in history, held some of the richest silver deposits in the world. Today, it is a silent, windswept ghost town, but in the late 1800s, it was alive with the hopes, struggles, and dangers of miners and their families. The promise of silver drew men from far and wide, eager to risk everything for the chance of fortune. The ore was so rich that even small pieces could be worth more than a year as wages elsewhere, making the harsh conditions almost bearable, at least for a time. Life on Silver Islet was brutal. Winters were bitter, with winds that howled across the rocky shoreline in waves that crashed over the docks. Miners and their families built small wooden cabins along the edge of the island, often just steps from the mine entrances. These cabins were cramped and simple, offering little protection against the relentless weather, yet they became home for the workers who had nowhere else to go. Each day was a struggle. Men trudged through snow and ice to reach the mine, carrying tools and ore, while storms threatened to wash away the fragile shoreline. The work itself was dangerous. Miners dug tunnels beneath the island and even extended them under the lake, carefully propping the ceilings with timber to prevent collapses, all while the icy waters of Lake Superior lapped just overhead. Despite the constant threat of injury or death, the miners pressed on. The mine produced silver in astonishing quantities, fueling a small but bustling community on the island. Families lived close together, sharing news, gossip, and scarce supplies in their isolated world. Children played along the rocky beaches, their laughter carried by the wind, while the adults labored, day after day, extracting the precious ore that would make some of them wealthy and many more barely able to survive. It was a life of extremes, moments of triumph when rich silver was unearthed, and moments of fear when storms and ice threatened to destroy everything. But no amount of human determination could control the forces of nature. Over time, Lake Superior's water levels began to rise, slowly encroaching on the mine tunnels and weakening the wooden supports. The island's precarious existence became even more dangerous, and the miners knew that their work was at the mercy of the lake. In 1884, that fear became reality. A series of storms and rising waters caused a catastrophic collapse. Mine tunnels flooded, equipment was destroyed, and the cabins were abandoned almost overnight. Silver Islet, once a bustling hub of activity, became a ghost town, left to the wind, waves, and ice. Today, the island remains silent. The cabins have vanished, and the mine lies beneath the lake, a hidden monument to the ambition and risks of those who live there. Only the rocky shoreline and the relentless waves tell the story of a place where wealth and danger existed side by side. Silver Islet stands as a haunting reminder that even the richest dreams are fragile when faced with the unstoppable power of nature, a windswept monument to the courage, perseverance, and ultimate vulnerability of those who once called it home. What remains today is peaceful, but the stories of the storms live on in every piece of driftwood. Balaclava, located in Renfrew County, developed in the mid-1800s as a lumber town. A water-powered sawmill was built on Constant Creek, and the mill became the center of local life. Houses, a general store, and blacksmith services appeared soon after, forming a small but active community serving loggers and their families. By the late 19th century, Balaclava was a thriving local center for milling timber. As was common with logging towns, its prosperity depended heavily on the surrounding forests. Over time, as nearby timber was harvested, the supply dwindled. The Balaclava mill was damaged by fire in the early 1900s, but was rebuilt and modernized with steam power. It continued operating for several more decades before finally closing in the mid-20th century, when competition from larger mills and resource depletion made operations impractical. Once the mill closed, Balaclava's population declined sharply. Most businesses shut their doors, and several buildings fell into disrepair. Today, Balaclava sits quietly in Renfrew County, a place where time feels like it simply stopped. The remains of the historic sawmill still stand at the heart of the village. Its wooden beams are weathered, its roof slightly bowed, and its frame leans just enough to remind you how long it has been fighting the elements. Even so, it remains one of the most photographed abandoned structures in all of Ontario. Visitors come from all over just to capture that iconic silhouette reflected in the dark water of the creek. A few homes are still scattered along the road, lived in and maintained, but the original core of the village is mostly empty now. There are no stores, no businesses, and no signs of the once busy mill town it used to be. Just quiet roads, thick forest, and the sound of the creek moving steadily past the old mill. Because so much of the industrial structure is still standing, Balaclava has become known as one of Ontario's best preserved and most famous ghost towns. Its ruins aren't just relics, they're landmarks. They offer a rare view into the province's logging past, frozen in place and slowly being reclaimed by nature. Blairton, located near Crow Lake in Peterborough County, grew rapidly in the mid-1800s after the discovery of iron ore. Investors built mining facilities, workers' housing, and a small village center. At one point, Blairton was one of the largest iron mining operations in the province. The settlement flourished for several decades. A schoolhouse, store, homes, and community buildings served the miners and their families. However, the iron ore was not as profitable as initially hoped. Extracting and processing the ore was challenging. And as other mines in North America produced higher quality ore, Blairton's operations became less competitive. By the late 1800s, large-scale mining had ceased. Today, Blairton is a quiet, mostly rural area. Only a few homes remain, and the once bustling mining village has largely disappeared. Little physical evidence of the original iron mining operation survives, with foundations and remnants mostly overtaken by the surrounding landscape. The site is now dominated by natural growth, as forests and fields slowly reclaim the spaces where homes, workshops, and mining facilities once stood. Walking through Blairton today, it's easy to imagine the industry and activity that once defined the town, even though the land has largely returned to a peaceful rural state. Blairton is often described as a lost or vanished mining town, with only scattered reminders of its past. Eldorado, located in Hastings County, became Ontario's first gold rush town in 1866. Gold was discovered on a local farm, and the news spread rapidly. Hundreds of prospectors arrived almost immediately, followed by investors who built hotels, stores, and mining structures. For a brief period, Eldorado was filled with excitement and speculation. However, the initial enthusiasm faded as miners realized that the gold deposits, while real, were limited. The ore was not extensive enough to sustain long-term mining on the scale early investors had envisioned. As the 1870s progressed, most prospectors moved on, and Eldorado returned to being a quiet rural community. Today, Eldorado is a small, quiet community with a modest population. While it is no longer a center for gold mining, a few original buildings and sites from the gold rush era still remain, offering glimpses into the town's brief but significant history. The area is primarily residential and rural, with much of the activity focused on everyday community life rather than industry. Despite the decline of mining, Eldorado's gold rush history is well documented and remembered, and it continues to attract those interested in Ontario's early mining heritage. Eldorado is better described as a very small rural hamlet with a gold rush history, rather than a completely abandoned ghost town. Depot Harbour, built on Perry Island in the 1890s, was once a major port on Georgian Bay. It was established by the Grand Trunk Railway as a strategic shipping hub, with grain elevators, rail sidings, warehouses, docks, and a growing residential district. At its height, Depot Harbour handled millions of bushels of grain annually and was one of the busiest Great Lakes ports. Workers, railway employees, and their families filled houses and boarding rooms. Churches, schools, and stores supported the town's daily life. After the First World War, shipping patterns shifted and rail traffic declined. The town's economic importance gradually weakened. A major turning point came in 1945 when a fire destroyed the grain elevators. Without them, the port no longer had a purpose. The railway withdrew operations soon after, and residents moved away. Many buildings were dismantled. Today, Depot Harbour stands completely silent, with no permanent residents. The town that once bustled with railway workers, dockhands, and their families has been almost entirely reclaimed by nature. Remnants of its past remain scattered across the site. Concrete foundations, fragments of the old docks, and ruins of buildings hint at the scale of the port that once dominated this stretch of Georgian Bay. Trees and undergrowth have overtaken much of the former town site, slowly blending the ruins into the surrounding landscape. The once busy streets are now quiet paths overgrown with grass and shrubs, and the sound of water lapping against the docks is the only reminder of the bustling port that once existed here. The land is now under the jurisdiction of the Wasauksing First Nation, and the area is largely preserved as a historical site. Depot Harbour serves as a striking example of a true Ontario ghost town, a place where human ambition once shaped the land, only for nature and time to reclaim it. Depot Harbour is considered a true ghost town, abandoned and overtaken by the landscape. Ontario's ghost towns tell the story of industries that surged and collapsed, mining booms that faded into silence, ports that emptied as transportation changed, and forests that were harvested until the mills that depended on them could no longer operate. Some communities still have a handful of residents. Others are fully abandoned. All of them serve as reminders that even the most promising towns can vanish when the resources or opportunities that created them disappear. Exploring these places today offers a glimpse into the province's past and an appreciation for the people who built lives in remote and demanding conditions. Thank you for joining me for our video today. Please don't forget to give a like and subscribe, and I will see you next time on the dark side of my room.